to conclude. Deputy Tommy Broughan, who is sharing with Deputy Pringle.
Thanks, Mr. Cannon. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak briefly on the 35th Amendment of the Constitution, Economic, Social and Cultural Rights Bill 2016, and I want to commend my colleague, Deputy Thomas Pringle, for bringing the bill before us, and also indeed for the tremendous work he's done in this bill in the current and indeed in the last Dáil. The International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights was ratified by Ireland almost 30 years ago in 1989, yet we still have to incorporate it into the Constitution and domestic law. The UN's reviews in 1999-2002 called for Ireland to adopt the ICESCR, and still we've evaded doing so, and the Minister has not given us any hope here tonight, really. The vast majority of members of the Constitutional Convention, 85%, voted in favour of the rights being protected in our Constitution, yet the Government has avoided following through with this. Instead, of course, you're offering us referendums, Minister, on issues that are not as of high importance, such as the Taoiseach offered last weekend. Of course, in the final meeting of the Constitutional Convention in February 2014, members voted to highlight certain rights which should be expressly stated in the Constitution, which are rights to housing, healthcare, rights to persons with disabilities, social security, linguistic and cultural rights, and the rights provided for in the ICESCR. I noticed in his earlier launch of the debate, Deputy Pringle, I think, dealt very widely and efficiently with one of the key critiques of this amendment, which is that it's merely aspirational because of the expression, and I quote, subject to its maximum available resources. I think that's an unfair interpretation, though, for people who have criticised the motion in that regard, as it means the Government, if this was put in our Constitution, would have to make decisions to best utilise the available resources to ensure the rights are protected, progressed and improved, and would have protected, I think, the most vulnerable in our society during the draconian cuts of the austerity years since 2008. The passage of the bill and the amendment of Article 45 would also trigger support for these citizens' rights from the judiciary in the mere fact of upholding the Constitution, and that section, of course, is very important, and I quote, "This duty shall be cognisant by the courts." I note, of course, Deputies Rory Quinn and Kevin Humphreys attempted in 2012 to bring forward similar legislation, and of course they had the opportunity for a long number of years in government to actually have brought this through the Dáil, and in fact to have had it, I think, easily passed at a referendum. In the last general election, of course, I stood as an independent candidate alongside Deputy Pringle and other colleagues as a right to change candidate. We believe strongly in the right to water, right to jobs, decent work, right to housing, right to health, right to debt justice, right to education, right to democratic reform, right to equality, right to sustainable environment, and the right to natural resources. And the bill before us reinforces those principles and would enshrine those rights into law by amending Bunreacht na Éireann. And the ECR rights, of course, include the right to work and just and favourable conditions of work, the right to form and join trade unions, the right to social security, to protection and assistance for the family, and the right to an adequate standard of living. And all of those rights, of course, are there in front of us in the bill if we want to bring it forward. Some of the ESC rights, of course, are provided for under the UN Declaration of Human Rights and various conventions, such as the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Over the years, of course, attempts have been made to realise key elements of those rights. I myself brought forward, I think, the first trade union recognition bill in the history of the state in this Oireachtas. But in many respects, since the 1980s, Minister, unfortunately, we've seen vigorous attacks on people's economic and social rights, and having the rights ensured in our Constitution will ensure they're protected and not at the mercy of the government of the day, and it will ensure a more consistent application of the rights even when governments change. I've just completed reading Professor Joe Stiglitz's book, Minister, The Price of Inequality, a powerful advocacy for ending the gross inequality that in particular has developed since the mid-1980s. And Professor Stiglitz, he goes back over the territory and recalls how, in particular, President Reagan, so reminiscent of in many respects of the current President of the United States, and Mrs Thatcher and her Tory gang, they led all-out assaults on the fundamental rights in the UK and the US, and began turning back the gains for social equality of the 1960s and 70s. And then we saw, of course, again in the 1990s, with the onset of financialisation, an amazingly regressive developments whereby people's mortgages were bought and sold, and where commercialisation of basic social services were developed. And of course, in this country, Progressive Democrats were the cancerous element that was, along with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, influenced the adoption, I think, of these changes. So I think it is time now to have this bill in front of us, and again to warmly congratulate Deputy Pringle, and to give the Irish electorate a say. We know know what the electorate will say if Deputy Pringle's bill is put to them. They'll vote to incorporate this in the Constitution overwhelmingly, 98%. So again, I warmly welcome the bill. Thanks, Ken.